Hey guys, it's LEGO QiYi3. These are my top 5 favorite Rubik's Cube mechanisms. And so today I'm going to be going through some of my favorite cubes that have really interesting mechanisms. And so I don't just like cubes just for like solving them or whatever. Part of the reason that I like some cubes is because the inside of them is just looks really cool. So a thing that a lot of cubers don't really do these days is take their cubes apart. But I have taken pretty much all the cubes that I own apart and put them back together. Look at how they work and everything. And so these are the ones that I like the mechanisms of the best, that I think are just really cool on the inside. And so I'm going to show them today. And so the first one is pretty straightforward, it makes sense, but it's just kind of interesting to me how they made a cube that was supposed to be impossible, but it actually is possible. And so this is the LanLan Super Floppy Cube, and this is actually better than a normal floppy cube in that you can do things like this, and replace these empty spots with an actual piece. And so you see where there normally didn't used to be a piece, there is a piece now. And so the mechanism of this one works pretty much just like a 3x3. So you can imagine how it would work. Like this is just one middle slice of a cube. And so this very centerpiece is like the core of a normal cube. And so if I just get a core over here, this is what's inside in the very middle of a 3x3. And so you can imagine that being that piece right here. And you see they just kind of like cut off both ends of it right here and put a little cap of plastic on it with a sticker. And so that's like the core. These 4 pieces on the outside, including the one that's not here, would be like the centerpieces of a normal cube. You see they just spin around freely and support the rest of the pieces. And then also these pieces are like the edges. And so when you have a piece in here like this, there's a little base of it right here. And this goes right up, and the base connects right from it to the center, just like an edge piece would. But since you can't have a bunch of extra room for the edge pieces, the whole part that connects the edge pieces to the middle is right in this little tiny cubey space in the middle. And so it's kind of like a very compact 3x3. So you see the mechanism of the whole thing is just stuffed inside this tiny little cubey sized hole. And since a lot of the pieces on the 3x3 aren't actually on this cube, you see like you'd have edges built up right here and here and here and everything. They have to have these extra little spacer pieces. And so what this is it's basically just one of these edge pieces with an extra little part, and so that piece goes right here just like the other pieces would. And I just think that's interesting because they took a cube that doesn't look like it's possible from the outside and made it possible by adding these little holes. A tiny little imperfection, but it helps it actually work and be a working cube. And so next up on this list, after that one, is one of them that is just kind of a normal cube, but a specific one that I think is kind of interesting how they did it. I don't really know why they did it this way, but it was kind of an interesting design idea. And this is the VCube8. I know you've probably seen this before if you've seen some of my videos, but the way this works is actually pretty cool. And so this one actually doesn't have a middle layer. And so most bigger cubes, like if you were to buy a Shengshou 8x8, they would have a middle layer on the inside. And so pretty much it's an 8x8 covering up a 9x9. And so if you look on the inside, there's no middle layer there. None at all. In fact, if you were to take these 2 pieces out like this, you can see these 2 pieces fit into each other, but this piece is actually not similar at all. You see it has a little part sticking out right there, much like the pieces of a 7x7 would, but it's not the same as a normal 8x8 would have. And so instead of having a 9x9 and covering up one of the layers, instead what they kind of did is they took a 7x7 and cut the middle layer in half. And so they kind of made a really fat 7x7, the middle layer really fat, and cut it in half. And the way they did that is they just kind of made the pieces so they all fit together right. And then in the very center of the puzzle, they actually have a 2x2. And the 2x2 allows those 2 inner layers that are kind of part of the 7x7 to stick together with all the rest of the pieces. And so that's kind of interesting. And as you might know, a 2x2 is always made with a 3x3. And so what this is a 3x3 instead of a 2x2 inside of an 8x8. And so these 4 pieces on every side are part of the 2x2. And so you can actually take it apart and there'll be a little ball, which is just a 2x2. It actually looks pretty cool. And I'm not quite sure why they did it this way. It does turn pretty well, and it's a pretty nice puzzle. I guess it's just kind of the lack of good alignment mechanism that they owned the rights to use. I guess that's what kind of led to this cool mechanism. But it definitely is pretty cool, and I definitely do like it, even if it is not the best 8x8. It's still pretty interesting. Next up, we have another cube. This one is actually a Square-1. This is the only one of these puzzles that's actually my main, and it's actually a pretty recent puzzle too. This is the QiYi Square-1. I'm not sure if there's any other puzzles that have a mechanism similar to this. I have never tried the Calvin Square-1, and it may be similar, but I just think it's really interesting how they took a puzzle that has always been like a bad turning puzzle with a very basic mechanism and made it pretty complicated and turn really well and have corner cutting like that. And so the way that most square ones work is you see we have a piece here, and all these pieces on here, so the edges and the corners, are just on this little track, and they spin around just like this. And then if you were to want to move the middle layer, that's fine. You just stop moving all those pieces and move the middle layer, and that's fine until you try and corner cut it. So you see we have a little path along here, and when we move this up, the path stops right here, and the piece will just fall off if you try and move it any further. And so that's kind of a bad design if you're trying to speed cube, and so that's why people don't use the cube twist anymore much. And so what QiYi did is, instead of having just a cylindrical track, they actually made a spherical track. And so at first it seems pretty similar. You see we have a piece right on this track along here, and the piece just slides in and locks in just like this, right in just as you would expect it to, and it can move right along this track. If you want to move it the other way, that works too. You see you have these green pieces in the center, which will move along with the rest of the pieces holding them in place. But if you want to corner cut it, that's fine, because if you move a sphere, like you have a sphere like this, you move it part way like this, it's still a sphere. You can still move a piece from this part of the sphere up here to this part of it down here. And then once this part of it is forced to go back down when you're done corner cutting, it will just line itself right up. And so you can move a piece up and down in its spot, and it will work just fine. Unlike on the cube twist square one, because it's a cylinder. And so I like the innovation that they put into this cube. I'm not sure if it's like anything else that has been made before, but I think that it's really cool that they can take a cube that doesn't corner cut at all and completely change the mechanism of it to make it spherical instead of cylindrical, and now it does corner cut. So that's pretty cool. There's a cool cube. Next up is one that's pretty simple, but it is actually a very cool mechanism. This is the Oscar's treasure chest. I'm sure you've seen this one before. Basically, the concept of it is a 3x3, just a 3x3, and then once you solve it, the white side will come off just like that. And so the way that this was designed is pretty much they took a 3x3 and eliminated the core. And so instead of having each centerpiece hooked to a central piece and then all the other pieces move around those, all the pieces are just kind of locked together in this little ball. And there's a hole in the middle of the ball. So you see here, it's completely hollow on the inside, no core anywhere. And so the centerpieces only hook onto the pieces around it, and every other piece hooks onto the pieces around that. And so pretty much every single piece has another piece or another couple pieces that it holds onto, and it just works. And so that makes this part of the mechanism pretty easy to make, so you can just pull it off. Pretty much these are unique markings on every single piece, so they're all very slightly different from each other. But once you have it solved, they'll all line up perfectly with each other. You see that little mark right there will line up perfectly with that one right there, and they'll just fit perfectly together just like that, but only when it's solved. When it's a little bit off, it won't come off. When it's turned like that, it won't come off. And if some of the pieces aren't lined up, it won't come off. And so that's pretty cool. Really, the different type of 3x3 mechanism is what allows this whole design to be possible, and it also has the added benefit of having a giant void in the middle to store stuff in. If you wanted to do that with this cube, and the locking mechanism works just fine too. And so that is this cube. That is one of my favorite mechanisms too. And finally the last one, it's also one made by Oskar van Deventer. He has some really cool mechanisms. It is the Mixup cube. And now this one is one that also is meant to look just like a 3x3 at the start. But what you can actually do is turn the middle layer 45 degrees like this. Pretty much what it is it's a 2x2. So you see the corners of it are just like a 2x2. You can move them all around. And no matter what middle layer moves you do like this, it always remains being just like a 2x2. You can't move it 45 degrees like this. And these pieces on the inside, the edges and centers, are actually the exact same type of piece. And so you see here, this piece on the inside would look exactly the same on the inside as this piece right here. So an edge and a center are actually the exact same piece. You could take the cap off this, theoretically, and stick it onto this piece. It would work exactly the same. And so the way that it works is if you kind of imagine a 2x2 mechanism with the four corners all around each other with kind of empty space in the middle, you could have just 8 pieces going all the way along on a track with little inner pieces in between each of those, and then you have little inner pieces next to those ones, and then pieces all around. You just had 3 axes of pieces that rotated, and you can move it just 45 degrees at a time, just like this. Each axis can move individually around the 2x2 core. And so you can actually see the inner pieces in here. You see those two little pieces right there. I'm not sure why there's two of them. I guess it makes it so they can make variants of this puzzle pretty easily. But you see here, there's the little inner pieces like this, and all the pieces around it are exactly the same, and they can all be cycled between each other. And it's just kind of this whole system of, you have a piece here, inner piece, piece here, inner piece, all the way around inside of a 2x2. And so besides the 8x8, which just has a lot of pieces, this one is probably the most complicated mechanism on the inside, just because of how many little tiny pieces there are that all have to work together to get it to work. But yeah, I do really like this puzzle, and it is a really fun solving challenge too. These puzzles are all quite fun. See here, I'll have links to these puzzles in the description, videos about them, and where to buy them. And so this one looks impossible, but it actually isn't. This one just takes a normal 8x8 mechanism and changes it up a lot to make it cool. This one just improves the problem that most other square ones had. This one just adds a cool functionality that you can take off the lid to it. And this one just completely changes the way that 3x3 mechanism works in order to add a little bit extra to it. And so I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, you can leave a like down below to show me that you liked it. Stay subscribed to be notified when the next video like this comes out. And also leave some suggestions down in the comments below for other videos that I can make like this in the future. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye!